And she stood there, and they walked out in the garage, and there was the display case. And she's holding the leather and the helmet. So they got a display case and no dolls, and he's got leather and no bike. And they just both gut laughed and dropped their items and embraced in what had to be the most loving hug and kiss of their 25 years. Why? Because after 25 years, probably far sooner, but at least in this one instance, they knew that they loved each other selflessly. And that's how love's supposed to work. In marriage, in friendships, in every relationship. We're here to give and not receive. You with me? All right. So love's not selfish, and love is not rude. Love is also not defensive. Some of you are already getting defensive as I talk about love not being defensive. But here we go. It says love is not easily angered. The word there for angered is the Greek word paroxenomai, and it means to be provoked or made sharp. It was the picture of a blade being sharpened by a stone, being readied for battle. And it's the idea of you being pushed to a point where finally you just freak out and anger kicks in and off you go. It's a little kid going to his brother and going, hey, 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 and that's not working, and finally grabbing his arm being like, hey, 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 and that's not working, and finally taking his foot and kicking him and hey, 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 and then the brother goes, ah, and this peaceful kid just wails on his brother and off they go. And you come in as a parent and settle things. Anyway, is that too graphic for you? Anyway, it's that whole idea of pushing someone over the brink. Now we all have, we talked about in the second week of this series, we all have a fuse. Some of us have longer fuses, some of us have shorter fuses. But this is just, isn't it interesting that, that Paul in his description of love mentions this idea twice? Love is patient and love is not easily angered. Do you think he's trying to hammer home a point here? Because think about your love relationships and the relationships that you have that are kind of in the tank right now. Has it been because somewhere along the line someone lost their temper and now unforgiveness and bitterness are in place and those relationships are a mess because someone was provoked and allowed anger to get the best of them? Think about them. And that's usually the cause of relationships ending. It's the cause of a lot of people's relationship with God ending. They expected so much of God, He didn't come through, and so their only choice they feel they have is to be angry at Him, and they walk away. Anger is a love killer. We've got to learn to be careful about that. Instead of doing the defensive thing, instead of being angry and provoked, we need to learn that true love listens and seeks improvement, especially when confrontation comes into play. Let's talk about something that's true of every relationship. Should all relationships grow? Who thinks all relationships should grow past where they are right now? Anybody agree with that? They should get deeper and become more meaningful. And if you're husband and wife, or if you're parent and child, you should grow deeper in your understanding of each other and your love for each other. Everybody agree? Everybody still agree with that? Okay. For that to happen, confrontation is going to have to occur. That is, because we're sinners involved in a relationship, we're going to do sinful things that offend the other person in the relationship. And when that happens, someone has to come to the person who's offending and say, hey, stop that. It's hurting us. It's called confrontation. It's healthy. It should be healthy. But it's often not. Why? Because too many of us, when confrontation comes, get defensive. We say, oh, wait a minute. And we enter into the well-use. Does anybody have the well-use, a bad case of the well-use? What's a well-you? I'll tell you what a well-you is. Someone comes to you and makes every effort to be kind and loving in a confrontational situation, saying, let's put it like this. Honey, when you beat the pans together at 3 in the morning and wake up the whole house, I'm just making up something. I don't really do this. Anyway, but when you do that, it wakes up the whole house and everybody's, kind of cranky the next day. I think it would be better for our family, babe, if you would stop this really crazy habit of beating pants together at 3 a.m. Would we all agree that that would be a nice way of saying that? That'd be a pretty, okay. But here's what happens with so many of us. We are so, and we've failed on the point that I just made. We have failed to put ourselves to death, and we are here to defend ourselves, that when we get this very loving and logical confrontation, we start in with the well used. Well, you aren't perfect. Well, just the other day, you burnt my dinner. Well, you don't pay the bills around here. Well, are you getting my point? It's that defensiveness. And instead of hearing what could be constructive for the relationship in our lives, we come up with this wall, get all defensive, wanting to believe that we're perfect, and it just makes things worse. It could get so bad. Anybody have this person in your life? You've just stopped trying. Every time confrontation has come, you always have an excuse. You always have another finger to point back at them, that they've just stopped bothering confronting. This, my friends, is the beginning of a very unhealthy end to your relationships. You may stay in them, but as far as them being vibrant and life-giving, that will cease. Why? Because they can't grow. If you are unconfrontable and unrebukable, if you cannot accept the fact that you need to change in some way and get defensive every time someone brings one up, then you won't change, and the relationship will not grow. Agreed? No, the Bible speaks about us being recipients of rebuke. It says in Proverbs 15:31 that he who listens to a life-giving rebuke will be at home among the wise. It's a sign of wisdom when you and I are able to listen to those who love us, speak into our lives, and make adjustments. That's a wise man who does that. It says in Proverbs 27, verse 5, that it's better for open rebuke than to have a hidden love. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. This is kind of an Old Testament version of stuffing it. Anybody here a stuffer? Here's what happens. If you're living in a life with someone who is unconfrontable, someone who is unwilling to change and is defensive every time you come to them with something that needs to change, you get tired of doing that, and so you stop the openness in your relationship. You start talking about the things that really need to be talked about, and you just start stuffing. And here's what happens with stuffers. Eventually, they get too stuffed, and they blow. And heads up when that happens. In the meantime, as they're stuffing, the relationship is stagnant. It can't and won't grow, because one person thinks they're perfect, and the other person knows he's not. Now, we need to be open to listening to each other. Eleanor and I have wrestled with this throughout our marriage, mostly me. Because when I got married, I had no idea how selfish I was. And then I was married 2 years and started to figure it out. Any guys with me? Anybody with me? Nobody? Some of you guys still haven't figured it out, apparently. Anyway, yeah, we're selfish, man. We're selfish people. And when you combine two people together in a marriage, you start having to, be responsible for someone else. You have to learn how to be open to rebuke. I remember one of my first huge mess-ups was needing time to blow off steam. Any guy ever use that as an excuse for abusing your family? I just need some time to get away. And the way I would go and blow off steam, it's so lame. I was 21. I lived in a really small town. Forgive me for the lameness of this. But I would go to the mall, and I would play this football game at the arcade called John Elway Football. It ruled. We didn't have systems in at least I didn't. I couldn't afford one. But, pumping quarters into this thing made me happy. Forgive me. I'm like a dork. All right, here we go. So I'd go there, and then this one particular day, it was after church. I don't know why I needed to blow off steam after church, especially since Eleanor's parents were in for the weekend, and her dad's diabetic and has to eat at 12:30, and I knew this. But I went, and I started playing John Elway Football, and I was killing John Elway Football.